Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to be looking through this book. It's called How to Draw the Animated Nexus by Steve Rude. Check it out. It's going to be a good one. It's a really cool book because it's how to draw the animated Nexus. Steve Rude created this character Nexus. It's a comic that I think has been running since the 80s. He was the other day doing a live stream as he does regularly on his YouTube channel. I recommend checking that one out. I'll leave it in the description below. And he was drawing out of this book, kind of just showing you how to draw different characters from the Nexus world. I'm not super familiar with the comic of Nexus. A few months ago, I also supported one of Steve Rude's Kickstarters where it was a collection of his Nexus comics. This is The Coming of Gormondo, and it just has some beautiful Steve Rude artwork in it. It's all fully colored and it's in a slightly larger format than your average graphic novel comic book. It's a collection of the Nexus newspaper strips. So I was glad to finally get my hands on a collection of some of his Nexus work. With that being said though, this is a book on how to draw the animated Nexus. It's been, from my understanding, Steve Rude's dream in many ways to have an animated Nexus cartoon. From what I gather, something that might be in the vein of the old Hanna-Barbera style superhero animated cartoons. And so this really, for him, is a very practical guide that he hopes to one day give to his animation team on how to draw all the characters, some of the inspiration behind the style and the aesthetic of the show, and pretty much everything an animator working on the show would need to know when it comes to drawing the Nexus cartoon. And I think it's really inspiring because the show, as far as I know, and as far as I think he has mentioned, is really nowhere near close to being picked up or made into a real show. And a lot of these turnarounds and sketches date back to like the 90s. This is something that he's been working on little by little over the course of, I think, decades. And with no real light at the end of the tunnel, he sort of keeps pursuing this idea and making it a reality on paper. And I think for anyone who has this idea in mind that seems very big and complex, whether it's an animated TV show or a graphic novel, it can be kind of overwhelming and daunting to figure out how you're going to make this thing into a reality one day. But sometimes the first step is really just putting pieces of it down on paper. Suddenly, it's a reality. It's really inspiring to see. So just for that reason alone, I wanted to pick up this book. So rather than continue talking about this, I thought in this video, we could just put this under the microscope and do some drawing. Okay, so I thought this would be a good place to start. This is early on in the book. It's just a page about figure construction. This is the most fundamental, basic way you can approach a figure, by starting with the gesture, building up basic shapes and masses, and then getting into some of the refinement. So Steve Rude breaks it down really, really clearly, just in 3 easy steps, also referring to the basic male and female mannequin over here. There's some really great notes involved as well. I'm just gonna jump in and just start drawing what I see. I think that's always a good place to start. You'll really grasp certain things just by going in and drawing it yourself. So I'm going to start the way Steve starts here, just with the basic gesture lines. And although when I'm drawing, I might not break it down exactly like this, it's similar in the way that when I'm drawing a pose from my head, I try to block it out really fast and then build up and refine in sort of steps. Because if you just start here and then start working on the hairline and then all of a sudden the pupil and all that kind of stuff before you get all the way down here, you don't really know where your figure is going to end. So this is always just a really good reminder, real basic reminder, that at the very least, you just want to show where the figure starts and where it ends. So now that we have the basic gesture, I'm going to go in and try and build up some of those bigger masses. There are some really great tips and techniques in here that of course can be applied to animation and storyboarding and character designs, but as far as some of us might be concerned who are interested in drawing comics and illustration, there's just a lot of really great information here on drawing in general. Figure drawing, likenesses, interiors, dynamic drawing, a lot of that stuff is in here. And oftentimes on this channel and other places, I reference How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which I think is a really great fundamental book for just learning how to draw in general, whether you want to draw comics or not. And there's also just some really great drawings in here, similar to How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, that kind of just get you inspired to draw in the first place. In the few days that I've had this book and I've been flipping through it, I feel like this book is very much in that vein. I think a lot of times some of us feel as though we could overlook some of these more fundamental exercises in terms of building up a figure just because we think of ourselves much more, I don't know, advanced, or we're too old for something like this. I think that's short-sighted, and I often remind myself of that because I think of those very things sometimes, those very excuses, thinking that like, oh, this is sort of like what you see in a kid's book or something like that. But just like a master violinist or pianist still practices the basic scales, as artists we need to constantly remind ourselves of the fundamentals of figure construction as well. No matter how advanced we might think we are, it's always a good reminder to be aware of these basic principles in terms of figure construction. I've never drawn Nexus before, so this will be an interesting exercise just for that alone. He's got a really cool, very simplified design. Seems as though it was almost meant for animation, even though he started off as a comic character. There's always been a sort of overlap between animators and comic artists and illustrators. There are definitely big differences when you get into the weeds as it pertains to our specific disciplines, but overall, we're storytellers. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from each other, and we often do. I never met a comic artist who isn't inspired by animation and vice versa. We all kind of share this simple idea and I think goal of bringing an idea to life through our drawing, whether it's actually putting those drawings in motion, like an animation, or making it come to life on the page, like a comic artist might. And then there's some really great just Nexus gestures. He mentions here to study from Jack Kirby and Alex Toth for some cool poses. He writes here, note how these drawings would read in silhouette form as well. That's a really important thing as far as gestures, poses, but also character design as well. If your character design could be clear and recognizable in silhouette form, you think of like a Mickey Mouse or a Bart Simpson or a Batman, those characters, if you completely black them out in silhouette, you would still be able to read them as those characters. That means that that character design is really strong. It has a very strong, recognizable silhouette. So he doesn't necessarily mean that here in terms of a character design, but more in terms of an actual pose. So you want the pose to be clear enough that if you were to black any of these out, they would still read clearly. when I was a kid and I saw a cool pose in a comic book, or I remembered a cool scene from a cartoon that I watched, I would get out my paper and pencil and just start drawing it. So in that vein, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to draw some of these cool poses, see if I get anything out of it. The thing about Steve Rude that I really like is that he's not trying to hide who he's influenced by and what era of sort of like Americana he's most inspired by. He's sort of like a throwback in many ways to a much more classic way of drawing for comics and illustration, which seems to be very much like Silver Age comics and animated cartoons from the 60s and 70s. He's also a staunchly traditional artist. I don't even think he like uses a computer or a tablet or a phone or anything like that. Thankfully, I think his daughter runs his social media and his YouTube channel and does all the technical stuff so that we can actually benefit from a lot of the knowledge that he's sharing on platforms like this. All right, so there's a little quick ink drawing. Could you guess which one I did and which one is the original? It's a really cool pose. I think that's super dynamic and very powerful. I tried to grasp that as much as I could in my humble rendition. If you do pick up this book, this is a good one for pose references to practice. You have figure turns and then you have head turns as well. So it's really important to know how the head turns around. Just understanding your character from not only the front view and the back view, but everything in between. Some great little notes here as well. He even breaks down the pattern of the way the hair is combed and the directions that the hair is going in. And then of course you have to have all the expressions when it comes to animation, but this could also apply to comic art as well. You want to get a wide range of different personality through your character. See them when they're happy, when they're angry, when they're serious, whatever the case may be. So these are really great examples of that. Just beautiful drawings to look at as well. These are too good to pass up. I feel like I want to take a crack at one of these. Let's see, which one should I draw here? They're all really good. I think I'm gonna go with this one though. That's a good one right there. It's a challenging angle, but the expression's really great. So let's see what we got. So it makes sense, certainly for animators to do character turnarounds, but I think if you're working on comics, it's just as important really to understand your character in a three-dimensional space. The more alive you can make your character in your head, and the more you can kind of translate that on the paper, I think the more that will come through to the reader, whoever's reading your comic, that that character really is alive and real. Not only do we want to create stories and create characters that are more than just one-dimensional from a storytelling perspective, but also from a drawing perspective as well. In Steve Rude's live YouTube streams, he often stresses the importance of thinking about your characters in a three-dimensional way, drawing through the figure, drawing through the head, understanding that what you're drawing might be 2D, but in your mind, you're sort of sculpting through something that is 3D. Okay, let's move on. So we have some of the other characters. This is Sundra Peel. I think this is Nexus's love interest. I guess this is like her more superhero costume, and then this is her in her downtime. You could definitely see the Disney animation influence here for sure. Sort of like a Snow White, Sleeping Beauty influence. I think I'm gonna take a shot at drawing this Sundra character. Let's do this one. That's a really great pose right there. Just for transparency's sake, no one's like paying me or asking me to do a review of this book. I realize that maybe it might come across like I'm doing an advertisement for this book. Not at all. I just was inspired after seeing Steve Rude's live stream the other day when he was drawing out of this book, and I figured, let me pick one up, see if it looks as cool as it does on video. And for me, it certainly does. So if you're interested in making comics, illustration, obviously if you're interested in animation, this is definitely right up your alley. But just in general, if you're looking to get better at drawing, creating characters, doing more dynamic figure work, I do recommend this book. I think the original one came out in the 90s, and then this one came out a couple of years ago. So I don't know how many more copies are available, but I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in picking this up. It's like super reasonably priced for the amount of information that you get out of here. Are you a Steve Rude fan? Let me know in the comments below. Are you hoping that this animated Nexus show finally happens one day? Also, if there are any other like how to draw comics or illustration or even animation books that you would like me to cover on this channel, let me know in the comments below. I would love to do a video similar to this on other types of books where we kind of look through and do some of the exercises together. I think that would be helpful for me and hopefully helpful and inspiring to you as well. I have plenty more things to get to and inspiration to get out of this book, so I'm going to continue working from here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.